Good morning, everyone. Let's see. Would like to reconvene the meeting for Thursday, March 14th, the Executive and Legislative Nominations Committee. I will make an announcement before we begin our public hearing that our committee meeting that was scheduled to convene right after this public hearing has been canceled. So we will not have that hearing today. We will take up the business from today's meeting at our next committee meeting. That is not next week, but the week after. So with that, why don't we say that we have on item number 1, we have resolutions for review, not bills for review. That's so clarification to the agenda. First is a House Joint Resolution for review. Connor Cowen of Fairfield to be a non-voting student member of the State Board of Education. Are you here, please? Are you here, Connor? Come on up, Connor. And please, if I mispronounce your name, please let me know. We'll let the committee. Cowen? Okay, sorry about that. Hi, Connor. And would you raise your right hand, please? You promise, swear, affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth? I appreciate that. Thank you. And if you have an opening statement, feel free to make it, and we'll ask you lots of questions. Just kidding. So,
Chairman Concepcion and Duff, Vice Chairs Godfrey and Looney, Ranking Members Iacarino and Kelly of the Executive Nominations Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. My name is Connor Cowen, and I am honored to be nominated to serve on the Connecticut State Board of Education. As a senior at Fairfield Ludlow High School, I've endeavored to engage with my education as fully as possible. Over the last 4 years, I've taken a total of 13 advanced placement classes, undertaken a 4-credit independent study of U.S. climate policy, as well as gained membership into the National Honor Society. During that time, I've been fortunate enough to impact my school through a variety of initiatives. Among these, 2 stand out. Firstly, in my sophomore year, I was selected as the youngest member of Fairfield's District Improvement Plan Steering Committee, serving on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Subcommittee. Leveraging insights from my work with No Place for Hate, a program of the Anti-Defamation League, I gained experience creating intergenerational change, a skill I know is directly transferable to the State Board of Ed. Secondly, I've served for 3 years as president of the Falcon Council, a school-wide student government body I petitioned administrators to create. The council has not only increased interclass communication, coordination, and spirit, but also allowed me to engage with student voices more directly, thereby understanding which issues are most pressing. Outside of school, my time has largely been spent promoting sustainability and civics, causes I've continued to advocate for when possible on the State Board of Ed. In regards to sustainability, I volunteered with my town's Sustainable Task Force and conducted research at the Harvard University Center for the Environment. Together, these experiences proved the complexity of getting stakeholder buy-in for green initiatives, an insight I've considered as I think about how to expand composting in schools or EV buses. In October, I also collaborated with students from Ohio, North Dakota, and California to compare our environmental coursework, ultimately sharing recommendations with educators at the North American Association for Environmental Education's annual conference. In regards to civics, I serve as the parliamentarian for the Connecticut Association of Student Councils. This has proven a wonderful opportunity to engage with Connecticut students from regions I otherwise would not encounter, hone my command of Robert's Rules of Order, and work more frequently with Yasmine, the other nominated student member. Since June of 2023, I've also served as the Chief Impact Officer at the Institute for Youth and Policy, the largest student-run youth civics nonprofit in the United States. In that role, I've overseen development of a 600-plus page discussion-based civics curriculum and partnership with organizations such as the College Board, further engaging with student voices and innovative educational proposals. For my work, I've had the honor of being recognized in a variety of ways. I've been named a Climate Innovators Fellow by the nonprofit Civics Unplugged, a member of the U.S. Rowing Scholastic Honor Roll, and a Platinum Award winner in the Connecticut Student Writers Contest. Most recently, I was one of 150 students from around the nation named a Coca-Cola Scholar and was accepted to Harvard College, where I plan to attend. Since joining the State Board of Education, I've been thoroughly impressed by the care each board member has shown for the students of Connecticut. I've also begun conversations surrounding the role of artificial intelligence in schools, a topic which I hope to continue making progress on, along with others if confirmed. I thank you for considering my testimony today and open to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you, Connor. I appreciate it, and congratulations on your nomination. Sounds like you have a resume that is larger than most people's who are my age. So, and I consider myself pretty young. But anyway, congratulations on really being nominated. Tell us a little bit about what you want to see or do on the State Board of Education. Like, what are some priorities for you? This is your senior right now,
Yes.
right?
Senior.
And then how long would you have on the state board? Is it 1 year?
So yeah, I've been on for 6 months or so at this point. So I would have April, May, and June left. In regards to sort of what's been done already, what I've tried to advocate for, it has really been artificial intelligence in schools, because as a student, I've been able to see the impact personally in regards to teachers no longer assigning take-home essays, or other things that I think require being in the classroom to observe. Um, in the remaining time, I think it really would be those two causes that I mentioned. And sometimes it's not always possible because budgets have been approved or things like that. But again, really thinking about how we can create sustainable schools and civically minded students as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And using your voice is always important, whether or not you get the whole loaf or the half loaf. Or, I mean, we work here in this building together, and we work in increments. Lots of times it's a marathon, not a sprint, and that's and we work together to try and accomplish those goals. I guess so. You've been doing this for 6 months. How's the experience for you so far? I mean, what have you kind of come away with it? Because you only have a few more months to go. So it seems like we're kind of voting to approve you when you're almost done already. So usually we vote to approve folks before they even start or kind of in the beginning of their term.
Yep.
So it was a little different for us. So walk us through a little bit about your experience so far.
There we go. I think the greatest thing has just been insight into government as a whole, being able to myself sit in committee meetings and see how those differ from the full board meetings has been really interesting. As well, dealing with really complex issues like racial imbalance has been difficult. And seeing how board members have led in those instances and often undertaken difficult conversations with superintendents, who obviously from a student perspective is like so high up there, has been it's sort of inverted some of my experiences and what I thought I knew. But it's been really cool to see in that way. I guess just sort of how relationships are built, and again how incremental progress is made as well.
Great. Thank you very much. Any other questions from members of the committee? Representative Iaccarino?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, and thank you, Connor, for being here. Just first of all, I give you a lot of credit for serving and it's really volunteering. So your perspective as a senior in your 4 years of high school, what could you bring to the board of members that are on the they're pretty much for 4 years, say, as far as our State Board of Education, what the concerns are of students, if you could have that perspective from all walks of life or stuff you see at your high school and other schools. I don't know if you visit any other schools to get input.
Yeah, I mean, so with regard to that, I think the Connecticut Association of Student Councils has been the greatest help, because that is not Fairfield County predominant. And so I've been able to interact with students in Fairfield and Westport very frequently through friends or joint initiatives with other student governments locally. But with the association, it's been really interesting to hear about different concerns. Mental health obviously remains one of the greatest ones that students raise, as well as, I think, frankly, how they can get involved in a bigger way. And so it's been wonderful to hopefully lead by example. And I've been trying to bring insights back to other students of how they might get involved in their community in other ways as well. Because I think a lot of students are looking for opportunities, especially now in a post-COVID environment where they can get out and volunteer and make a difference. But sometimes they struggle to identify what those might be.
I appreciate that. And it's just, obviously I'm older and it's such a complex society today. And I just spoke to two groups of North Haven High School kids who I represent 2 weeks ago, I think. And I said to them what the governor said to all of us when he gave his State of the State speech in February. And I do agree. The social media, the phone, sometimes, I know you're a kid, but we're just as much culprits. But put the phone down. And my recommendations, I agree with him, is sometimes we put those phones on in school. And while I was speaking to the kids, they all had their phones and they weren't on them the whole time. But it's such a temptation to grab that phone. And I think that leads tell me if I'm wrong, sometimes to the mental health issue because the social pressures of social media. Could you respond?
Sure.
Thank you.
I think definitely, at least anecdotally, I don't have the data on that, but from my own experience and from knowing other students as well, that definitely is a contributor. I know that different schools have undertaken various policies to deal with cell phones. I know my own personally has sort of a slot where you put it in at the beginning of class, and that's sort of how attendance is taken, is based on the numbers. And so that ensures it's sort of out of hands and out of mind for the duration of class. And so that's been great. But to your point, I think some of the issue as well comes after school and sort of an unregulated environment. And so, again, with how we engage students, I think showing them those different opportunities to volunteer or to get involved in their community is a great way to get them off of, online and doing things and connecting with people. And that's really, it will help with mental health.
I appreciate that. And it is, you can't regulate after school. One last question, and you mentioned you're with a group of students. Do you go around the state to other schools or to try to come up with policies for the State Board of Ed? And with that, I have a business and I have a couple 23 and 24-year-old people work for me besides other people. And they'll hear me sometimes talking about policy and they'll talk to me afterwards and they'll say, you have to look at the perspective of somebody in high school and it's not one size fits all. And that helps me actually, I think, as a legislator, and my kids are older, but when I was, as a parent. So with that, and then I'm done with that, but thank you, Mr. Chair. Go ahead.
So with the Association of Student Councils, it's not necessarily an active effort to get out there. We did just hold the annual convention, which brings students to one high school. And so that was wonderful to be able to talk with them just even in passing about what they were noticing in their schools and what policy they wanted impacted. I would also add, Yasmine and myself are part of an emerging organization called the National Student Board Member Association. And so that is a collection of student board members from around the nation. And so that, again, while developing, has been a really interesting opportunity to see what other student board members are hearing from their students from an even broader populace.
I appreciate that. And then we have schools in the inner city that are every school district's different, and hopefully we could reach out to one another and try to learn from each other. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Connor, for stepping up.
Thank you. Senator Martin, before you go, we had Representative Figueroa, then we'll get Senator Martin.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Connor, nice meeting you. Thank you for getting involved, into our communities at an early age. I applaud your effort.
Thank you.
I have a few questions for you. I heard you saying that you are reaching out to others, right? So to get involved. So how has the response been when you are reaching out to bring in new people and perhaps share the ideas that you may have?
Yeah. I think that, again, really that Connecticut Association of Student Councils has been the largest vehicle for that. I think kids have a lot of ideas, or students have a lot of ideas with policies that they want to see improved. Again, mental health, I think, is one of the most frequent things that I hear. I think my difficulty is then in thinking about, having been on the state board now for a number of months, how do you take a concern and actually try to turn it into a policy or a recommendation for the state board to take up? So that's been, I guess, my personal challenge. I think students have been very, very willing to share about what they've been experiencing.
Thank you. That was going to be my next question.
Yeah.
What do you do with the information or the concerns that you
Yes.
hear from your colleagues, from those that you are reaching out? So I see that you said that you have a challenge, right?
Yep.
So what are you doing with that challenge? Are you keeping it to yourself? Or are you reaching out to, to your legislators or to whoever you need to reach out to so that you could deliver or at least try to help to solve the issues that you are being presented with?
Sure. I think firstly, the Legislative and Policy Development Committee at the State Board has been the greatest vehicle because that has been much more discussion based. And so if I need to get something on an agenda there, that is much more feasible than the State Board. So discussing it with board members in that venue, or even at lunch after board meetings, we've brought up small ideas and said, hey, how do you think we could address this in a meaningful way? And then I would also add, it has been that National Student Board Member Association of getting to talk to other student board members because they face the same challenges that we do, because many of them are non-voting in how are they translating student ideas into policy as well. So I have, I'd say, doubly tried to reach out to both the state board members who many of them were more familiar with the process and how things were done, as well as other students who have been in my shoes as well.
And are you seeing any results?
I think it's been tough to get things done, because also I think so much of it has been a learning process, and that's the tough part about a one-year term is, you know, by the time I start to get my feet in the ground and understanding how things are done, you know, it's already coming to an end. But I am very hopeful that we have a new board coming in, a large majority of members. And so if I can at least plant seeds of ideas of what the students are thinking, and then have the other student board members in the future carry that through, I think that is my personal goal, is just to raise those ideas, you know, with artificial intelligence being one of those. And so I would say we were very happy, Yasmine and myself, that it was mentioned a total of 4 times in the new 5-year plan for education. And so there are small things like that, which will take time to implement and to make change. But it has been wonderful to see small things like that happen.
Great. Don't
Yep.
give up and
Yep.
don't feel bad, because I am also new here.
Yes.
So I'm still learning. So
Yes.
we're learning together.
Yes.
So my next question is, do you think that you are properly representing the interests of every student in your current position?
What I can say is that I'm doing my best. I think between a variety of different organizations and speaking to students on a daily basis and trying to reach out in the ways that I can, I've tried to represent them. I would also say hearing from different cases that come before the state board, like charter school renewal or different things like that, has given me perspectives on students that I otherwise wouldn't have engaged with. And so as different things come before the state board, I think I'm even more knowledgeable about what different students are facing. And that makes me more able to respond to those issues.
Perfect. Don't give up. Keep going.
Thank you.
So my last question is, where do you see yourself in the near future?
Yep.
Within this position, or do you aspire to get, you know, something bigger than this position? Because I see right now you are a non-voting member.
Yep.
So
Yep.
does your voice count even though you are a non-voting member?
I think it does count, and I've tried to make it that way. In terms of the future, I am hoping to study government and public policy, and my hope is to make a return to either state or national government in some meaningful way, likely in the environmental field, where I'll have voting privileges or something of that sort.
Great. You
Yes.
have my blessings. I yield the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Senator Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Connor, congratulations, first of all.
Thank you.
Your family must be extremely proud of you. You've been on various committees, and your resume speaks well of all the organizations that you've participated in.
Yep.
You've been able to learn and listen to fellow students and those that are educators as well. And I guess my question is, you know, we always hear about math scores and reading scores, and sometimes, you know, there are certain populations or municipalities that don't do well versus other communities. My question to you is, what would you change if you were an educator right now or part of the policymaking decision makers, right? What do you think you would change to help improve those scores?
Sure. I think so. As a I have a sister who had reading difficulties herself for many years and still struggles with reading. And so I have been able to see sort of the back end of it firsthand. And I think for a lot of younger students, especially, COVID really did impact that and their ability to achieve what has been the most helpful for her. And so that's really what I can recommend is one-on-one sort of close instruction. It is very difficult, and I understand the position of teachers and trying to teach to a broad range of students. You have students at either end of the spectrum, but really providing personalized support. And that's why I think, I believe it was the state board and or the governor who invested in high dosage tutoring for those areas. I think that that's the best that we can do. I think also evaluating how students best learn reading and math. And so that's why it's been nice to learn about the science of reading and to see that policy being implemented where there's evidence that suggests that students learn to read in a certain way. And so if districts aren't following that, that's at least a first step, is to say, if the evidence supports this, we should try something new and see where that gets us.
Just one other question regarding the students.
Yep.
What are the students saying about their education? How do they feel about, being in school and having to go through, K through 12, then maybe higher ed after that?
Yeah. I think the student experience varies immensely, even at a high school like my own. In general, I think when I hear positive things, it's because students feel that opportunities are available to them, whether that be advanced classes or extracurriculars or well-funded sports within their schools. And so I think the goal is to get every student in a school environment where they feel like the opportunities are sort of at their fingertips as opposed to having to grasp for them. And in that way, they'll be able to take advantage of them and have a positive experience, because even if academics aren't someone's forte, if they can find, that one club or that one activity that they can latch onto and enjoy, I think it makes the experience much more positive.
Yeah, the extracurricular activity is important. Making connections and making friends.
Yes.
Absolutely. And so those that complain the most, what is their biggest complaint?
I think in some ways it's the age-old, like, when are we ever going to use this in the real world? That does still come up. But I would applaud, I think at least my teachers have gotten much better about actively answering that question, sometimes even having activities or projects designed to, we just learned something in geometry. All right, you're going to tell me, when are you actually going to use this in the real world, and try to apply it in a certain way. Even with my AP Calculus class that I took last year, we had a very open-ended final project, and I was able to talk about within environmental science, how are you going to use calculus? So I think that's the largest gripe, is sort of that misalignment of things. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, just check one more time, see if there's any other questions from folks. Seeing no questions, I would just say to you, Connor, that I have a guest today, Jack Pavia from Norwalk, who is a college student at American University, and he came last day of session with me last year, and today he's home for spring break. So while you may only be a member of the State Board of Ed for a couple more months, don't be afraid to come back and shadow your legislator and come learn the process. We love having folks up here who are interested in what we're doing and seeing how it works behind the scenes. And one day I did the same thing in high school. I shadowed my state rep, and here I am, for good or for bad.
Yes.
And so that's it does matter, and your interest is exceptional. And same with our next person who's coming up for the State Board of Ed student representative. Those things are important. So we just asked one last question that we ask everybody. In your short life so far, is there anything embarrassing in your past that would prove to be embarrassing to the governor, the state of Connecticut, the legislature, this committee, or anybody in the world?
No.
Okay, thank you. Free to go.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's an awkward question for adults, let alone
I know.
18-year-olds. Yeah. Next we have, let's see. Yeah, we have Yasmine Galal. Tell me again if I have mispronounced your last name. And there's a typo on the agenda, so I'll blame it on that. Good morning.
Good morning.
Did I get it right?
Yes, you did.
Hey, all right, 1 for 2. All right, please raise your right hand. Do you promise, swear, or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Please read your statement if you'd like, and then we'll ask some questions.
Thank you, Chairman Duff and Concepcion, Vice Chairman Looney and Godfrey, Ranking Members Yacarino and Kelly, and distinguished members of the Executive Nominations Committee. My name is Yasmine Galal, and I am a senior at Woodlands Regional High School. I am honored to be nominated for the role of student representative for the State Board of Education. Educational advocacy has been an essential part of my life. My father had exactly $20 in his pocket when he immigrated to the United States from Egypt with the goal of improving his own education in medicine and making better education possible for his future family. Most saw his ambition as unrealistic, but he persisted and eventually became a neonatologist. His accomplishment of that goal drives me to make sure that I do my part to help him achieve his second goal of giving his kids access to a robust education. At Woodland Regional High School, I am ranked first in my class, am on the computer science and engineering pathway, and am a member of 4 National Honor Societies. Throughout my freshman year, I discovered my passion for technology and policy. I dedicated significant time to training MariaBot, the world's first artificial intelligence Android teaching assistant. This experience propelled me to join a local robotics team catering to students from schools without robotics programs. As the team's lead programmer, I developed some of the highest scoring autonomous functions globally, leading my team to the top 0.5% in the world. However, amidst numerous competitions, I became acutely aware of the disparities in technology access, motivating me to explore technology through a political lens. In terms of policy, my involvement in my school student government led to my appointment as Legislative Affairs Coordinator for Connecticut Student Council, where I began laying the foundation for legislative activities, including a mock legislative day at Connecticut's Capitol in collaboration with the Connecticut General Assembly. Today, as president of the Connecticut Association of Student Councils, I oversee 300+ member organizations. Additionally, serving on the Connecticut State Student Advisory Council on Education and the State Student Equity Advisory Board since sophomore year, I've conducted research on educational issues, presenting recommendations to the Board of Education. These experiences have undoubtedly prepared me for the student representative role. Looking ahead, I envision a career that harmonizes my interests in technology and policy. This aspiration led me to conduct research with Stanford University over the summer, where I contributed to programming an educational virtual reality experience. We compared its effectiveness to traditional paper learning methods and analyzed its policy implications through a comprehensive literature review. My dedication has been recognized in various forms, including being named one of 40 National Aspirations in Computing Award winners, a Connecticut delegate for the United States Senate Youth Program, a member of the Disney Dreamers Academy, and one of 150 students in the nation selected as a Coca-Cola Scholar. Representing my peers on the Connecticut Board of Education has been a tremendous privilege. Together with Connor, the other nominated student member, we proposed the creation of an Instagram account to facilitate more direct peer representation. Thanks to the overwhelming support we received, the account has been a success. Thank you for your time and consideration of my testimony, and I welcome the opportunity to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks for your testimony. Appreciate it. I tell you what, if this wasn't the Executive and Legislative Nomination Committee, with your role here and interest in technology and policy, I'd ask you about Senate Bill 3. I'd probably ask you about what do you think of yesterday's vote in Congress about TikTok and all that. But we'll keep it a little more localized here and
All
on
right.
topic. But those are the kind of interesting things you probably have opinions on and thoughts about with regard to technology and policy and how that all intersects together. And how even Senate Bill 2 with our artificial intelligence bill that we have this year. So, but anyway, so you're just like our last nominee who you've been on the Board of Education now. You're kind of at the end,
Yep.
right? How has the experience been for you?
So far, it's been really fun. I think being able to represent students has always been something I've enjoyed, but then getting to do it at the actual Board of Education has been a whole new experience because As I mentioned, I have served on boards where we put together research projects and present them to the Board of Ed. And whenever I would do that, I'd always see that student member at the board meeting, and now to actually be that student member has been a very
Yeah.
amazing experience.
That's awesome. And I think kudos to you for setting up the Instagram account for that, because I don't know how long we've had student representatives on the Board of Ed, maybe not that long, but maybe it's been a long time. And I would imagine most students would not have an idea about that, but at least giving them access to you all helps them feel like they're probably part of the process and it's a little more inclusive. So I appreciate you doing that. So it's not just two people who are very motivated to serve, but you're asking other folks who may not have the opportunity to, or but may have opinions to at least be able to understand what's happening and how their voice impacts policy. So good job on that. What are your plans for the fall?
I'm currently waiting on about 15 more decisions, but for now, I'm looking at Vanderbilt University, but I'm keeping my options open.
All right. Well, as a parent of two college students, I can tell you wherever you land, that's where you're supposed to be. So I'm sure you'll do very, very well in the future. So thank you. Representative Yakarino?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for being here. Yasmin, is that correct?
Yes, thank you.
I'm really impressed with the science part of your high school education. Do you want to go into the engineering or science, for your career?
Yeah, so for me, technology has definitely been the part of STEM that has spoken the most to me, as well as engineering. So I definitely want to pursue a career where I'm advancing technology in a way that keeps humanity at the forefront. I think nowadays we see a lot of technology as advanced for harm, but I do think technology also presents a lot that we can take advantage of. So I hope to use technology and engineering combined with policy to make sure that we advance tech for good.
I think that's wonderful. And for a woman, I think it's even more important to have more young women and women in general feel comfortable with science and STEM, engineering. I just met with the president of Quinnipiac University Monday, Senator Looney and myself, and there's a lag of engineers in our state now, a shortage of engineers. And I think for a woman, it's even more important. And hopefully for your time in the State Board of Education, and I'm sure you'll probably still be involved somewhat because you seem like that type of person, to encourage women and all people to get involved with STEM and mathematics and science, because it's our future. I've been a strong proponent of the sciences for quite a few years up here, and it's finally taking hold again. But years ago, we were one of the leaders. Now we're getting back there again. And I hope you continue that. And that seems like your strong point, with probably many other aspects. But where's Woodland, Connecticut? I was curious. I don't know where.
It's in Beacon Falls, Connecticut. It's a regional school, so it's Prospect and Beacon Falls students
Okay,
attend.
I'm in North Haven. It's about 15, 20 minutes away. But just one last question. When you speak at your meetings, the State Board of Ed meetings, do you mention the needs? I'm sure you have the needs, like I asked Connor, the needs of the students. What are kids, high school kids, or even younger, looking for? Are their voices heard? The biggest thing in anything is the voices being heard, and then doing something about it.
Yeah, so I think being able to hear from students through the Instagram account and through Connor and I both being involved in other organizations where we reach out to students has been very helpful. And I do think that on the Board of Ed, it's definitely been helpful to kind of bring that voice and see situations where the new history curriculum standards are passed, and it really aligns with a lot of my work that I've done on the Student Equity Board. So I think that's definitely been nice to see the impacts there, but then also just to be able to discuss general ideas in the Legislative Policy and Development Committee where it's not as structured has also been good. Connor and I have had great discussions about artificial intelligence in schools through just interacting with board members before and after meetings as well. So I think lots of opportunities.
Well,
to represent.
congratulations, and thank you for serving, and I appreciate it. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Martin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yasmin, congratulations. Well, and thank you for serving. How about that? To you and to Connor, it sounds like you'll probably be going out of state for higher ed here. But I want to encourage both of you to come back and live and work here in the state of Connecticut. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Okay.
This is where the jobs are, Senator. So of course. Any other questions from members of the committee? No. Let me just check online here. Okay, seeing none. Yes, and we would certainly encourage you to make sure you come back to our wonderful state here. All right, the awkward question, anything in your past that would prove to be embarrassing to the governor, this legislature, this committee, or anybody else?
Nope.
Okay, thanks. Thank you very much. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. Congratulations. Okay, next is Seth Zimmerman of New Haven, to be a member of the State Board of Education. Good morning.
Morning.
Before we get started, I'll say, so Mr. Zimmerman has education from Yale and Dartmouth, and sorry, it just doesn't match up to our student representatives here.
It's hard to compete with them.
It's hard to
It
compete with
really
that,
is.
isn't it?
They get faster every year, you know.
Okay, please raise your right hand. Do you promise, swear, affirm, to tell the truth, whole truth?
I do.
All right, thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Chairman Concepcion and Duff, Vice Chairman Godfrey and Looney, Ranking Members Yacarino and Kelly, and distinguished members of the Executive Nominations Committee. My name is Seth Zimmerman, and it's truly an honor to have been nominated by Governor Lamont for this role and to be here speaking with you today. So I'm a professor of economics at the Yale School of Management. My research and teaching focus on the economics of education. I've got more than a decade, really closer to 15 years now, working with policymakers at the local, state, and national levels in the US and abroad to design, deploy, and evaluate different forms of education policy. You know, I work as an educator and I study education because I believe that education is a crucial determinant of economic opportunity, personal growth, and that well-run education systems can help communities and democracies flourish. So when I was first approached about this nomination, I felt honored, but also, you know, awed by the scale of the responsibility. You know, creating and governing an education system that provides opportunity to all students across bounds of income and race and geography and language is really a moral imperative that we all, especially in this room, I think, face. And I'm really grateful for the opportunity to contribute here. My hope is to use the knowledge and experience I've gained from my work in the service of students and educators in the state. And also to continue to learn from policymakers, from my fellow board members, and from other stakeholders that come before the Board of Education about what our communities need and how best we can respond to those needs. Let me tell you a little about my work. So again, it centers on data-driven policymaking. You know, for example, I've worked with the Florida Department of Education to use data on education and labor market outcomes to evaluate the economic returns to expanding college access. Here in Connecticut, I've worked with the New Haven's public schools for the past 10 years or so to help the district redesign its centralized school enrollment system so that it's easier for families and students to navigate and then to sort of evaluate the effects of those changes. I'm not going to claim we have that fully sorted out, but I think we've made some real improvements. More recently, I've been working with Connecticut's P20 WIN data systems to study early childhood education in the state and how that affects not just children, but parents as well. One thing I've learned from this work is that through careful policy design and data-driven evaluation, it's possible to affect meaningful change in the present and over the long run to build a base of policy knowledge that can be applied in the future. This is a perspective that I'll bring with me to the board. Now, I've also learned a great deal about the practical hurdles associated with building and acting on evidence. There are a lot of obstacles that make evidence-based decision-making hard for policymakers and administrators, given the competing demands in their time, the need to make choices quickly, and often budget constraints. So policymakers, administrators, and teachers are each doing vital work for the success of our schools, and my hope is to empower and not encumber them through this approach. And I'm an advocate, I would say, not just for the potential of evidence-based policy to improve education, but for practical approaches that make generating and acting on evidence easier, while of course ensuring the privacy and security of student and family data. And let me conclude just by noting that beyond my professional experience and my professional perspective on the Connecticut public schools, I also have the perspective of a parent. So my daughter is a second grader in the Haven Public Schools. My son is slated to join her next year when he starts kindergarten. My hope is to do what I can to contribute to success of schools in the state, throughout the state of New Haven and beyond, and in doing so to honor the essential work of our teachers and school administrators. So truly, it would be an honor to serve on the Board of Education. Thanks again for the opportunity to speak with you today, and I welcome any questions that you might have.
Great, I appreciate it. Thank you very much, Seth. And you're very well qualified. Congratulations on your nomination.
Thank you.
You know, kids are sound like doing well. One's a teacher, you said? Both?
My kids are not teachers. They're,
okay.
but they're,
Your daughter?
my daughter is 8 years old. So
Oh,
maybe,
eight.
well,
Oh,
turning
sorry.
8.
A
So
little.
she's in second grade.
Oh, second. I'm sorry. I
And my
misunderstood.
son will hopefully join kindergarten
Oh,
next
cool.
year.
All right.
Once
So
we
you have
get
a
through the
vested,
choice
you have a
process.
vested interest.
I have a very strong vested interest. Yes.
And it goes quickly, I can tell you.
Yeah, it already has been.
What I want to ask you is that the State Board of Education is pretty decentralized, from an education policy standpoint in the state of Connecticut. How does that impact what you are trying to do from State Board of Education standpoint to really impact your kids even?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, the state board, obviously we have local, a lot of the control of education in Connecticut and throughout the country is local, right?
Yep.
And I think that's appropriate. Different towns have different needs and different priorities, and I think we should respect that. What does the state board do? What can we do? I think we can perform a couple of functions, or I hope to help perform a couple of functions. One is the dissemination of guidance and best practices. The state can be a hub for promulgating the insights we get from the sort of policy analysis that I was discussing, and how do we help districts learn from each other, learn from the experiences of other educational institutions across the country and across the world. So that's one. The other is, of course, regulatory. We need to make sure that we're consistently applying standards to charter schools, to public schools, to other organizations that come before us. So I view those as really being our main responsibilities. One is sort of disseminating best practices, and the other is sort of ensuring that best practices, but also legal restrictions are followed. And that's kind of how I would view my role here.
Great. I appreciate that. Give us a sense from your economic standpoint as to how education drives economics in a state.
Yeah, I mean, one of the real points of emphasis in economics and labor economics in particular is the idea of human capital, right? It's the idea that what you learn in school, you take with you for the rest of your life, and really drives long run labor market outcomes, not just for the individual, but for society. This is an ongoing theme of my work. I think education is probably, I would say arguably the crucial driver of economic growth at the level of the state and the nation, right? And I think this is true across the life cycle. So, pre-K feeds into K-12, feeds into college. These things create career pathways. When I get a good job, when I learn something, I don't necessarily keep all the benefit of that idea for myself. It spills over, right? So if we have one person, in Connecticut come up with a good idea, do a better job, working at an engineering firm, for example, this creates jobs, right? So I would view improving the education system as maybe in the long run, the single most important thing we can do to promote economic growth in Connecticut. Now, again, I'm coming as a member of the SBOE. This is a topic that's dear to my heart, but I think there's some real evidence for that.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And congratulations again. And we look forward to having your expertise.
Thank you. I
there.
appreciate that.
Really very much appreciate it. Representative Yacarino.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Zimmerman, for being here. And wanting to serve this, it's your first appointment, is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
I appreciate that. For me, as somebody that's older, that's more simplistic, education, I think we've overcomplicated it, and it should be, reading, obviously mathematics, history, social studies, English, and of course, then eventually as you get older, like sciences and math and engineering. But I think most of us are a huge proponent of reading, and unfortunately, a lot of kids from when they could read, or technically supposed to read, can't read by the time they're 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 years old. And we've tried many things in this state, and I always fail. And you could tell me if I'm wrong, we have too many mandates on our teachers.
Mhm.
And it is locally controlled, but it's also controlled by a lot of the mandates we levy, like right to read. Concept's a good concept, but it comes with a huge price tag that many towns really can't afford, or they're not needed. And I would argue I'd rather put more money in resources for paras or extra teachers than computer program that might work for a couple of years then be obsolete. I know you're new,
Mhm.
but I would hope you would go to work with your fellow members on the State Board of Education and with the commissioner, as far as just listening to teachers more, like the students listen to the fellow students. We really need to listen to teachers more and what works and doesn't work. And I wouldn't be sitting here today if I wasn't a proficient reader, and that's because of my mom, my parents, and my early teachers, Miss Carver and Miss Parody. And I think we've lost that because there's so many moving parts. Like we're trying to fix everything, but I think we should go, I personally think, and you're much smarter than I am, but we should go back to basics. That's just my 2 cents. And if you could elaborate on that, I'd appreciate
Yeah,
it.
great question. I mean, I guess I would agree with a number of things that you said. So one, teachers are truly a crucial, perhaps the crucial input to education, in particular in the early grades. There are a few things that matter as much as having a great teacher in terms of learning outcomes in both math and reading. The second thing, of course, is about, okay, how do we balance, the dissemination of best practices that I alluded to in my response to Senator Duff with, the concern about unfunded mandates, right? You can't, it's hard to be asking districts to do things if you're not, giving them resources to support them. With specific regard, I guess to this right to read legislation, that is a case where I think there was, as actually my esteemed colleague Connor pointed out, a pretty good scientific basis that, for most kids, we think that some approaches to reading knowledge work better than others. And to the extent the state board can help advance those approaches across the state, I think that's probably a good idea. That being said, I have noted that there have been critiques of the specific approach that's been adopted for, in enforcing this mandate, right? And that's something I would be happy to dive into and think about more, as we sort of, as my term on the board advances past the first 2 meetings. One thing I'll say actually as a parent is that I noticed, New Haven adopted this switch from a sort of to this sort of science of reading approach in the year before the state mandate was required. So this is the first year in which they've adapted a new curriculum. Both the teachers and the kids, at least in my experience, seem to be working pretty well under this. And this is a case where I think it's still teacher forward, but the question is, okay, can we help the teachers teach in a way that will be most effective for them by sort of helping empower them with knowledge from the world about like what approaches to reading curriculum in this case are effective for most kids. So that's kind of how I would view that.
And I appreciate that. And it's hard because it's a different world than it was 10 years ago, and
Mhm.
20 years ago, and 30 years ago.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, we all do recognize, both Democrats, Republicans, kids need to learn how to read.
I couldn't agree more.
If they can't read, they can't learn.
Mhm.
And something we've struggled with, and I would always say, go back to basics. You can't legislate family life, but you could have teachers having the tools
Mhm.
to teach that when a child is able to read,
Mhm.
and put a strong emphasis on that.
Absolutely.
And literally, because it's much less expensive early than later. That's all. And I know you believe that. I'm sure you do, and I know Senator Duff does too. But I just think we make it overcomplicated. And I would hope. And I live in North Haven. I don't know if you live in New Haven area.
I live in Haven.
I frequent New Haven. I love New Haven. My grandmother used to live in Edgewood Avenue. My kids live there for a while now. They're grown. They're all over the place. But anyway, I appreciate you stepping up, and I would hope you could bring it back to the.
I'll do my best. Thank you.
And I live, I could give you my cell. I live in the area just to try to. It's so. It just bothers me to a core that kids can't.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's really troubling, and thankfully, my daughter now is a pretty good reader. It was
Right.
watching that occur and sort of thinking of the effort put in by her whole family as well as by her teachers and the kids in her class to sort of get all these kids to the level where they can, read to learn, rather
Right.
than learning to read, has been a big push over the last few years. Really, have felt engaged with.
I appreciate that. And we put a lot of money into certain technologies. I would put more money to teachers. Teachers, I think, are probably the most important job of any of us. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Zimmerman.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Representative Quinn, Representative Godfrey, Representative Figueroa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Zimmerman, congratulations on your nomination. Building off of what Representative Yacarino said and something that Connor said in his testimony, I have a concern if we're doing enough for our children and are we doing the right things for our children? And what I mean by that is, I place a high value on a college education. I have 2 degrees, but it's not for everyone.
Mhm.
And I think in most instances, when a student walks through the door of high school for the first time, you've got a pretty good idea of whether they're on a college track or not. And I'm just concerned that for the ones who are not, we're not doing enough. We probably don't have enough technical high schools. I think public high schools have dropped a lot of hands-on training type classes because of the cost of doing it. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think it's important to keep two ideas in mind at once here. One is that, college is a great choice and a great investment in one's future economic life for many students. But the other is that most people don't graduate from college, in the United States, right? And as an educational organization, as a state, we have to be offering a path for these students to rewarding lives, to rewarding careers. You bring up Connecticut's technical high schools. I actually think Connecticut's technical high schools are a great asset to the state, like truly. And there's great work on this actually by professors at the University of Connecticut, Steve Ross and Eric Brenner, for example, who have showed that the students who gain access to these technical high schools don't just sort of succeed in their academic life in high school, but actually realize labor market returns over the course in their careers. My understanding is that at many of our technical high schools, there are lines out the door, in the sense there are more people who would like to go than who are able to, and they have sort of selective admissions for that reason. In a world free of budget constraints, and I don't set those, but in a world free of budget constraints, what I would like to do is expand and make that kind of technical education, which again seems to be very good, specifically in Connecticut, available to more students who want it. The challenge, of course, we face, and again, as my esteemed student colleagues have pointed out, is how to adapt these to the continuously changing technological environment. That's something that I'm sure we'll be grappling with over the coming years. But I would say both, okay, always be updating. That's not a new problem. The technology changes, but the need to advance never does. As well as trying to expand access as much as we can to what's a great resource. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And again, congratulations on your nomination.
Thank you.
And look forward to good things from you on the board.
Thank you. I have to try.
Thank you, Representative Godfrey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations. There's a few areas I want to explore, because I certainly very much appreciate your approach to education using data. It is a difficult time because there's a lot of beliefs and opinions and false facts that seem to override a lot of the discussion that's going on, and data, I think, is the answer to a lot of these. I've been concerned there's been a small but growing movement nationally in the last decade or so to turn education into a commodity rather than a government service. Betsy DeVos was a big proponent of this. In other words, we need to take taxpayer money to line the pockets of people who are more concerned about the politics of education than they are of actually teaching kids. Have you had any experience or thoughts on this trend?
You're referring here, for example, to voucher schools, or to voucher schools run by for-profits? Maybe you could be a little more specific.
Yeah, that's certainly a consideration. Those who are just trying to take public education away from our elected boards of education and turn them over to investors.
Yes. I mean, my view is that the public education is a critical good for, producing community, for producing democracy, for producing good outcomes for our kids. There are examples, in my view, of states where, private provision of education has become, more prevalent than using public money has become more prevalent than here in Connecticut. And my view is that in cases where that's left with minimal regulation, it doesn't tend to work out that well for the students, or, by extension for the state, given the important role we think that, education has in promoting economic outcomes. So my view is that this is actually an important place where the SBOE comes in, is like, to the extent that there are schools other than public schools educating our kids, there's just a really important regulatory role for the board and for the legislature to play.
Thank you. I'm a product of parochial schools. That's
right.
Something that's been around for a long time. But I'm concerned about these trends where it's more about money than it is about education. That kind of slides into my next area of concern. There also seems to be an attitude that I'm not particularly happy with, that, schools are about vocational training. Their purpose is to provide only the skills to get a job and get a career. My concern is to have a healthy society, to have a healthy democracy. Students need to learn how to think critically, how to think creatively, and vocational education for all is good. And I have Henry Abbott Technical Vocational High School here in Danbury that I represent. I'm concerned that it's leaving this how to approach an issue, how to think about it, how to criticize it, how to make decisions about it, is slipping away from us. So what has your data said anything about that kind of thing, or is that kind of outside? It's a difficult thing to measure.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. So let me first off just start by agreeing. I think schools do a lot of things. One of them is, prepare people for careers, but another is prepare, individuals to be actors in society, be participants in a community, and to be participants in democracy. And for that, those skills are valuable to continuing to have the society we have. And if schools don't teach them, who will? So I think that's a really important role that schools have to play. You mentioned, there's a list of skills like critical thinking, and sort of put that in opposition to sort of vocational training. To me, those skills to some extent also go hand in hand. I don't think there's necessarily a conflict. When we think about how, AI, for example, will change the skills that are valued in the economy, I think a lot of the, what will remain, I think, to humans are these kind of critical thinking evaluative skills. How do we deploy the new technology as opposed to how do we write this line of code? So I think the kinds of critical thinking skills that are potentially important, beyond vocational training, are even more important now for vocational training than they've been in the past. Finally, you bring up this question of what can we measure? What does data say about this? My view is that one of the main hazards actually in this sort of evidence-focused, data-driven approach to policymaking or to evidence or to policy advice is that you miss the things that you don't measure, right? So for me, an important thing that I'm trying to, an important direction for future work in some sense is okay, how do we gather data on these sort of seemingly ineffable things? How do we make sure they're not omitted from the kind of rigorous evaluations we do of programs? We want to make sure that when we think about what our what our schools, what our other education-related policies are doing, that we incorporate these benefits and don't sort of forget about them because we don't see them pop up in the, in math test scores, for example.
Yeah, you're absolutely. I actually had a small business owner down here approach me a few years back to complain. I've got openings for new hires, and I'm looking at some applications from high school graduates. And my problem is the only thing they seem to know how to do is to take standardized tests. Mm-hmm. And I need, said the business owner, I need people who can think because I need them to solve problems. And I'm uncomfortable with the trend to, if it's not on the test, it's not important, that we test, and don't give students the abilities and the capabilities to be able to, for example, problem solve. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, from purely a hiring perspective, this is a problem I face as well. I hire people for research activities relatively frequently, and we need people who can code and who can have technical skills, but also who have good judgment. And you want to look for both things, right? Oftentimes, what shows up on a transcript is the former, is the coding. I actually think, fortunately, a lot of people agree with you, and this has been reflected in public policy to an extent. I think if you look across the country, the scale of testing, has been reduced, I think, somewhat over the last 10 or 15 years compared to a peak, in the immediate sort of post-NCLB era. So I think the tide is going with you a little bit on this, and partly because many people share this view that maybe we were testing a little bit too much and we were spending time teaching to the test or even just physically testing for too much of the academic year.
And the teachers you referred to, the professionals, agree. They get exasperated when half of my classroom is about teaching to the test. So that's that kind of goes hand in hand. And lastly, a slightly different subject. I'm in Danbury. I'm an urban legislator, and I worry about a lot of things, but I worry that kids can't learn because they're hungry.
Mhm.
And I'm a proponent of free school lunches and breakfast for that matter, because in too many of my constituent families, that's the only decent meal they're going to get in any day. How does that fit into your thinking?
Yeah, I mean, so my view is that it's hard to learn if you're hungry. Further, my view is that investments in kids' education, investments in kids' health, investments in meal programs for kids, I would put that in that second category, are really, again, speaking as an advocate, as opposed to someone who has to make, budget decisions himself, are really some of the best investments we can make as a society. If you look over the long run, typically, when we do evaluations of this, they actually pay for themselves. These kids will do better. They'll attain more education. They'll often earn more, and they'll often pay back, whatever the money was for the meal, just in terms of the additional taxes that they pay. So, my personal view, and this is what I teach in, when I teach classes at Yale, is that there's an extent to which you can argue that we can't really afford not to do that. To not to provide this programming, right? It's not budget neutral; it's budget positive. Again, this is stepping away from a little bit of the kind of direct question I'll be dealing with at the SBOE, but that's sort of my view on this issue.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your candor, and good luck on your tenure on the Board of Education, State Board of Education. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Representative Figueroa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Zimmerman. Congratulations on your nomination, and thank you for your willingness to continue serving on this board. With that said, I do have a few questions, but I want to start by saying that I do share the concerns, expressed by Representative Giacorino. Somehow I feel like we are not teaching enough, or we are allowing the kids to go into the next grade without them really knowing how to learn or how to read, right? They are not properly reading. And this, of course, is causing some trouble when they are going into the next grade, or even furthermore, going into college. Because I see a big challenge of these kids that are coming out, even from high school, that they don't have the knowledge. While they could read, they are not able to comprehend, what they are being taught. So I would like to know as to how do you feel about eliminating midterm and finals in high school? And I ask this question because we are facing that situation right now in one of my local schools where, the midterms and finals have been eliminated. That will be my first question. If you want to answer, I could follow up into my next one.
Yeah, I mean, so first off, I agree with both you and Representative Iaccarino that teaching children to read is perhaps certainly one of, if not the most critical things that schools do. And if children are graduating from high school without being able to read effectively, that's not an outcome that we can accept as a school system. The best way to do that is hard, right? And I think the legislature has been working, and certainly the Department of Education has been working on doing our best to address these issues. You raised this specific issue of eliminating midterms and final exams at a school in your district. I actually would like to just ask a clarifying question. What is the rationale for what is that being done as a response to issues with lack of reading knowledge, or as a solution to? I don't understand the rationale. I guess it would help me respond to you if you could clarify.
It is my understanding, that after speaking with some parents who are concerned about this and that are in opposition of this decision, is that somehow is for the schools to show that they will have more kids graduating. So it's just to rise the graduating rate.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
As opposed to the kids really learning. So it's just to prove to the state, that the kids are graduating now, but are we graduating the kids without them really having the knowledge?
Yes. Yeah. So the thought is that maybe this is sort of an effort to, game the metrics a little bit in some sense, to create statistics that are sort of more favorable, even if the underlying learning is not there. I don't think that's good. this is sort of, again, a tension when we say, okay, we I think appropriately, construct a bunch of accountability metrics that we use to, guide our evaluations of schools, of school districts, and so on. And we look at those when people come to the state board. The challenge you always face, as a regulator, is that if you make a metric and say that it matters, people may respond in ways that you don't want, right? By making the outcome go up that you're looking at, even if the underlying thing that you really care about is not, is not increasing at the same rate. And so one of the challenges that I take at the SBOE would be to say, okay, how do we design metrics? How do we design accountability systems that encourage schools and districts to invest in learning rather than focusing on, a number that they think that we want to see. And so that this sort of focus on learning as opposed the true learning outcome as opposed to just making the number go up is something that I strongly support and will absolutely engage with in my time on the board.
And how do you think, Mr. Zimmerman, that we could measure the knowledge or, how do we measure that the kids have already learned, Is it just by giving them a test, or is there any measurement ways that we could make sure that the students in fact are learning? Because, there are many kids, there are many people that are very, very good as to what they do, and yet they are not good while taking a test. So that is obviously setting them up for failure, but at the same time, I know that they could pursue any career that they may want if they were not being tested. So
yeah, no, that's a
controversial and
we're wading into some deep water here, but we can try our best. So I mean, I think on the one hand, I think measurement of reading knowledge is really important. Like as educators, we need to get some sense of how we're doing, right? And it's not a perfect sense, as you say. There are many people who may be able to read effectively in many settings, but don't do well on exams, and that's something that tests will miss. Nevertheless, they provide a useful signal about how we're doing. For example, we think about COVID. We look, one way of knowing how COVID affected our kids is by looking at the scores in the state reading exams. And what we saw is that, at the level of the state, we lost maybe a half a year or more on average in the reading and math scores, right? With bigger effects and less comeback in districts like Hartford and New Haven, right, where I live. And I think it's really important for us to know that so we can respond to it. So there has to be some evaluation by whatever imperfect measures we have that allow us to assess that. At the same time, our goal as a school system should be to enable kids as best we can. If people have the ability to do well in the absence of tests, or if there are other ways that they can prove their capabilities that would be valuable to colleges or to employers or to other future opportunities, I think we should work to think about how they can signal that and how we can enable them to develop those abilities. So that's my view on this issue, is that we need both measurement, but also to not penalize people who just happen to be bad at test taking.
All right. Thank you for your answers.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Not seeing any other questions. We'll ask the question. Is there anything in your past that might prove to be embarrassing to the governor, the legislature, or this committee, or anybody else in the room?
No.
Thank you. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Stephen Higgins, West Hartford, to be a member of the State Board of Education Resource Center Board of Directors. State Education Resource Center Board of Directors. I think I got that right. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for being here. Please raise your right hand. Do you promise to swear affirm to tell the truth, whole truth?
Yes, I do.
All right, thank you. If you have an opening statement, feel free to make it.
I sure do. Thank you. Dear Chairman Duff and Concepcion, Vice Chairman Looney and Godfrey, ranking members Yacarino and Kelly, and distinguished members of the Executive Nomination Committee. I'm honored to address you today as a nominee for the State Education Resource Center, CERC Board. My name is Stephen Higgins, and I'm deeply grateful for the opportunity to potentially serve on this esteemed board. Education has always been the cornerstone of my life, providing me with purpose and fulfillment. It's been my privilege to serve my community through various roles in the field of education. My journey began as a teacher in East Hartford, where I dedicated 17 years to shaping young minds and nurturing future leaders. Subsequently, I transitioned into administrative roles, including Dean of Student at Capital Regional Education Center, where I spearheaded innovative strategies to meet the evolving needs of our diverse student body. During my tenure as an associate principal at Oliver Ellsworth School in Windsor, I had the honor of fostering a vibrant learning community for pre-K to second grade students. Together, we cultivated an environment of joy and discovery, enabling students to achieve their full potential in their formative years. Currently, as the Director of Equity and Inclusion for South Windsor Public Schools, I am committed to investing in people, systems, policies, and programming to ensure our educational institutions cater to the diverse needs of our student-centered community. Throughout my career, I've had the privilege to serve diverse student populations, empowering individuals, engaging families, and inspiring colleagues to create positive change. My passion for education and equity is unwavering, and I am eager to bring my expertise and dedication to the CERC board. If confirmed, I look forward to collaborating with stakeholders across the state to provide resources and support that unlocks the full potential of every student. I'm committed to fostering a culture of collaboration, sharing best practices, and maintaining a learner's mindset to navigate the ever-evolving landscape of education. This nomination represents a dream come true for me as it aligns perfectly with the aspirations I harbored as a teacher and currently as an administrator. I'm excited about the opportunity to make a meaningful impact and contribute to the advancement of education in our state. Thank you for considering my nomination, and I am available to address any questions or concerns you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we've had folks over the past come in on the State Education Resource Center Board of Directors, and I think there's, what, 4 members? No, I'm sorry, that's not true. The SBE appoints 2 members. Let's see, the governor appoints 4 members, and the SBE appoints 2 members who are also confirmed by the legislature. The legislative leaders appoint the 6 remaining members. So it's a small group of folks who don't always come up all the time. So it's one that I know this committee had to kind of reacquaint ourselves with at times. So I congratulations on your nomination. Appreciate your being here this morning. And it is important. It is an important role, though we don't have the privilege of having folks from CERC here often in front of us. So while we have you, is there any field of education which you think CERC should be more involved in?
Currently, CERC's work with equity has been impressive over the years. I'm not only excited to be a part of the board, but as a young member, youth in education, I had the opportunity to be a part of CERC's many educational programs. And earlier on, we asked a lot of questions about empowerment and getting people together and hearing voices. And so from a long ago, even in 2006, I believe, CERC had done that for me and many of my constituents, many of those who I sit with and collaborate today in the field of education. And so CERC has done so much work within the special education realm, within the racial equity realm, and several different equity realms, gender equity, LGBTQ, just so many pathways for people to educate themselves through program and really to create a common language. And so I think there's so much that they have done. And I think that with some of the state's pushes for diversifying our workforce, our talent management workforce, I could see there being some expansion in that work for districts to grab onto and to create some understanding and collaborate with one another moving forward.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. And how many meetings have you attended so far?
3.
3. Okay, so you're an entrenched
I'm interested.
member at this point.
Still listening.
I know it's hard. It's not easy because you get into these groups and trying to bring your expertise in and everything else, but trying to find a way and kind of what's happening at the moment. All right, I will hold off on asking any more questions at the moment, see if we have any others from members of the committee. Representative Quinn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Higgins, congratulations on your nomination. What would you like to see accomplished during your tenure on CERC?
It's a great question. I think that with the ever-evolving world of education, our demographics are changing. The introduction of AI, the needs and the accommodations of students. I would love for CERC to do what they've always done, and that's to create platforms, to create understanding for individuals to make connections. We're human beings. We have to touch each other. We need realms where we can look each other in the eye and talk, express emotion in a place that is safe, that we know that we, at the end of the day, we're going to do what is best for students, what is best for our families. I think that Circle over the years has done that. And I think because of the work that they have done, you have educators in the state of Connecticut that have knowledge, have connections, and have forwarded that work. I would love to continue to do that in the evolving changes, identifying what needs are current and making sure that we get a lead and empower voices around those needs.
Okay. Thank you very much. And again, congratulations on your nomination.
Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, before, it's interesting with having our student members of the Board of Education here today, and it seems like just from your comments you just made to Representative Quinn, it seems like it would be a great synergy of having some students on there as well, or at least those conversations with them. Bringing up AI is so important. Not as I was at a meeting on Tuesday morning with business leaders and some of us who are interested in the AI bill, Senate Bill 2, and saying to folks, look, let's not freak out about AI. But let's understand it and help us in our lives, but do it in a way that makes sense. That's equitable, with equity, that helps, but also we're training our workforce for how technology will move forward in the future. And I think what you're doing is going to be very helpful in that realm, and I appreciate that for sure. Representative Yakarino, do you have any questions at all?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I apologize. I had to testify real quick. Mr. Higgins, just want to say thank you and congratulations. Am I correct?
Yes.
So on the Resource Center Board, what would you just take information? And thank you for being here, by the way.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
So as far as a Resource Center, a Board of Directors, what would the role be? I apologize for walking in late.
Sure. I think some of our main role for CERC is to really provide the programming across the state to help educational institutions really deal with a lot of the equity issues or changes that are happening or evolving, and really having a base for people to collaborate and communicate. The way that I see it on my role is I'm a collaborator with several individuals to try to advise that charge. And the work has been vast, right? So I remember being a student of CERC myself when I was a young teacher in the profession. I know what it did for me, allow me to make connections, to communicate with other people, to hear ideas and to share ideas and to implement those into my practice. So under my tenure with CERC, I hope we can continue to do that at the high level. And a second ago, I just talked about our evolving society, introductions of AI, introduction of demographic change, challenges within our inner city. And so to make sure that we can have the complex conversation, as Connor talked about earlier, we have those complex conversations and really try to create some methods in which people can move forward together in a way that takes the complexity out. And so that takes a lot of hard work. That takes a lot of planning, a lot of dedication, and a lot of talking amongst others. And I hope that we can do that.
That makes sense. I appreciate that. Well, so you were a teacher?
Yes, I was a teacher for 17 years. I've been an administrator over the last 8, and currently I'm a director of equity and inclusion.
So as a former teacher, you realize that I think many times teachers feel like they're handcuffed almost. They can't really teach the way they might have taught, say if they're teaching for 25 years where they first started. Now there's so many, it's so complex. I visit schools a lot. I was going to be a teacher. One time my friend became a teacher and I just didn't do it. So things changed in my life. My younger son's just got a job teaching in Southern Connecticut. But the fact is I don't think we listen to them. I just don't. I think we listen to the administrators. We don't listen to the teachers. That's just my 2 cents. You could tell me if I'm wrong. You were a teacher at one time.
Yeah. It is so important to listen to our teachers. Our teachers are amazing.
Right.
They put in a lot of hard work and dedication. They work late nights and they're on, especially our elementary teachers. They're on all day with maybe a 20-minute lunch. And so I've been fortunate enough to teach, to be an administrator of a K through 2 school, of a K through 6 school, and a 6 through 12 school as well. And so I've seen it at different levels. It's imperative to listen to teachers, but the pie is bigger. You know, we have to make sure that our teaching and learning and how we engage students is proper. We have to make sure that there's real life experiences that our kids can grasp onto before we take it to another level. We have to make sure that there's access and opportunities for all of our students. And just like we talked about earlier, we talked about the basic needs of students. We have to make sure that those things are met. And so we have to listen to our teachers, but we also have to make sure that we're engaging our families and we fully understand what we're trying to implement. And then we use that knowledge to really take a look at our systems and structures, take a look at our policies, but specifically in our educational institutions, it might just be our practices, right? It's not always the big policy that we're trying to pass, but sometimes it's the practices, how we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. And then if we find those gaps, then we create the programming necessary. We talked about reading earlier. There's so much data that if our kids read 6 minutes every night, what a big difference that makes. And so, you know, there's a lot of information that depends on where students from, what is the current population, you know, where's the geography, what are we doing? But we have to take all those things into considerations, and then we have to develop methods to meet the needs of folks in a way that can make
I
it.
appreciate that. Hopefully, you did what you say. We'll have more listening and then also action, but I wish you the best and congratulations and thank you for serving.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Seeing no other questions, we'll ask the question. And oh, I'm sorry, Representative Figueroa.
Thank you. Congratulations, Mr. Higgins. I'm glad to see that you are being nominated.
Thank you.
Obviously, you will be representing our communities. I am very much in agreement with you just said, and you know, with Representative Giacolino, we definitely need to listen to our teachers because after all, they are the ones that are performing. They are the ones that are teaching our kids, you know, and preparing them for the future. But at the same time, I also recognize, you know, as a former elementary school teacher. So what I am saying right now, I'm not speaking as a legislator, but rather as a mother and as a, you know, former elementary school teacher. So I do understand the need of us as teachers, you know, being heard, because sometimes we come up with mandates that many times we cannot accomplish. You know, we cannot deliver what is expected of us. So with that said, I would like to know as to what do you think that we should do or could do to encourage kids to pursue a career? Because like what Representative Quinn was saying, not everybody has been made to go to college. However, there are other venues, there are other ways for our kids to get educated. And right now, we are facing the lack of the workforce into electricity or plumbers, you know. There are many other ways for our kids to get educated, which doesn't have to be into a college. And sometimes, you know, our kids don't go to college, not because they don't have the skills or the desire to go, but rather because of, let's face it, we face financial obstacles that we cannot bypass. So what do you think we should be doing to encourage our kids to go into different careers where they could make a decent life?
The first thing I want to say is that, first, thank you for that statement. And I'm with you that every student is not going to go to college. I remember my personal story with my parents is that from an early age, they told me, this is what you're going to do. Just decide where you're going to go to school. But I knew that, and I had that support, and that was my vector. I think for students and families within our educational institutions, they need to know what their options are. They need to know at an early age, and those pathways have to be accessible to them. And experiences in those pathways before they make the decision should be accessible to them. And I think if it is, and our supports are in the right place, then our students and our families will make the correct decisions for them. But there are so many, my sister is a counselor at a technical school. There are so many champion stories that come from that. And I don't know what the outcome would have been otherwise. So I think it's very important for us to let students know what those options are, support families and students through those options. And I think that there'll be some great things that come out of that.
Great, thank you. Definitely, we need to support both the families and our kids, because sometimes we as parents are telling the kids what to do. And many times they don't want to do what we want them to do. So I think it's important for us to listen and then support our kids, what they are going into,
Thank you.
to the classes. Thank you so much. I yield, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Seeing no other questions, comments from anybody, we'll ask the question. Anything in your past that might prove to be embarrassing to the governor, the legislature, this committee?
No, but if you ask my 14-year-old daughter, she might disagree.
That's why we don't allow kids to answer those questions for their parents. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, this concludes our public hearing for today. As I said, our committee meeting for today is canceled. We will let folks know when our next public hearing will be scheduled and committee meeting. Public hearing is adjourned. Thank you so much.